support, generally we have to start somewhere, and the best place to start is with an annual fund campaign. You also need an emotionally compelling case for support. And we're going to talk again about the case for support. And that's really, what are you raising money for, and why do you exist, and who are you going to serve? Um, an annual fund also helps you chart a course for success, and it allows for a commitment to moves management strategy. And I use the words donor engagement strategy and moves management strategy together interchangeably. So just to define those things for you. Okay, Sarah, next slide. So you will remember the pyramid of giving. You're going to see this one a little bit different. So the pyramid of giving, this is the same slide that this is a different version of the same slide that we've been using, but at the very bottom of this, first time donor annual giving. And this is all adapted from the AFP book, if you will, fundraising fundamentals of fundraising. So first time annual giving is your number one base for support. It's generally the first way somebody comes to you in your organization. And then we want that to repeat over time. And generally we go through a series of upgrades. So if somebody's given you $100, perhaps you can increase that to $150 the next year, or perhaps to $200, and on up the pyramid. But repetition is important. We want people to continuously support you, and as they continuously support you over their lifetime, we want that support to grow. And not only are you growing your donors up, hopefully you're adding to your annual fund donors. So it's important to grow wide, if you will, across the base for support in numbers, but also to pay attention and honor the donors and engage them in ways that are meaningful to them, so that they move up that pyramid. So we had talked about major gift fundraising and really capital campaign fundraising, but it all starts with annual fund. So next slide. So let's look at that a little bit differently. So really, a lot of people start with events just as a way to acquire a donor. You might have some type of event, a gala, an auction, that sort of thing, where you're trying to grab people into your file, your donor file, if you will. We also want to increase participation and learn why donors give to us. But annual fund is really the core for support. It's the one place that over and over you can build relationships, you focus on retention, and grow that donor's giving. So a large breadth of constituents across the bottom, and then the size of the gift is growing up the pyramid. So just another reflection of what you've seen before, but I show it to you over and over again because it's so important. And always that annual fund is on the bottom. It's not because annual fund is the least important, it's because it's the most foundational support that you can have. Next slide. So what is an annual fund? An annual fund is generally gifts that are renewable, gifts that are unrestricted versus restricted. And unrestricted means I give it to you and you can use it for operational support. You can use it for the greater intent of the organization. You could possibly even use it for a special project. A restricted gift is a gift that a donor makes for a very specific purpose. Many organizations will put limitations on restricted gifts. They will say, if you're going to give us a restricted fund, it has to have a threshold amount. Or, for example, if you're giving to an organization and there's a specific program you want to support, you would acknowledge that you wanted to support that particular program. But annual funds are generally unrestricted, which is for a organization, especially small organizations, some of the best money that you can raise because it helps you operationally grow your organizations. There are also gifts solicited for right now, right this moment, current use and time, not for endowment, which is for longevity, but gifts solicited for today and for what we're going to be doing over the next 12 to 18 months. Next slide. So an annual fund business plan is where you start. It begins with winning it on paper, having a plan and winning it on paper. It's not surprising to me that my friend Michael Beer comes to us as a educator and someone who went to school to be a teacher. Surprisingly, and if you think about it, unsurprisingly, teachers make some of the very best fundraisers. And the reason is they have a lesson plan. They go into their classroom and they implement that lesson plan. There is a schedule of time. They know over, 13 weeks of a semester what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and they react to the plan. And you've heard me say fundraising's not hard, people are hard. Well, teaching's not hard. Students and parents and other teachers are hard. So working your plan and adapting as it goes. So winning it on paper. So that's your lesson plan, if you will. It begins with an emotionally compelling case for support. It's grounded in realistic goals. It moves to setting strategies. So not just what do we want to raise it for, but who are we going to raise it from and on what timeline. And it really becomes a blueprint with a timeline for how you're going to move over a period of months in order to raise the money that you need. And every year you need to evaluate your annual fund based on the cycle. What worked best, what didn't work, how do we need to pivot, how do we need to rearrange what we're doing, and possibly even change our case for support, change our timing, but it's something that you do every single year, and you have to rebuild the plan every single year, or adjust the plan, if you will. Okay. Next slide. So an annual fund also establishes patterns of giving that can be tracked. So you've heard me say it's really important to know where your donors are coming from. Well, if you're coming from annual giving, you could, for example, look at your database export spreadsheet, or even if you're keeping track of all of this on a spreadsheet, and look at what are donors doing over time. How much are they giving? How many donors do you have? Who's staying with you? What donors are you retaining? And which ones are falling off your file, and why? Can you go back to them? But it helps you watch donor patterns. It also helps you establish a donor pipeline. And so when we talk about a donor pipeline, we're really talking about moving donors up that pyramid. It helps increase donor participation rates. So hopefully you're engaging the donors that you have and asking them to invite other people to participate with them. It helps you keep data about prospects up to date. So at a minimum, you're communicating with them annually, you're thanking them on a routine basis, and engaging them into the core mission of the organization. It also helps you reinforce your organization's core messages. It's not unusual for a first-time annual fund to go out. You run your case for support. You know what you think you're raising money for, and you find that certain things within your organization resonate better with donors, and some things they might not get so excited about. It helps you really define those core values and the core messages that you want to give to donors. Hopefully it helps you identify new leaders and new volunteers. So you heard Michael talking about engaging volunteers and leadership into the process. This is what it's doing. So if you engage volunteers, particularly new volunteers, and they do an awesome job, an annual fund committee, for example, might be a place that you start somebody as a potential leader in your organization, and then later they've done such a great job in your annual fund committee that you might perhaps invite them to be on the board. It also strengthens the bands and bonds between an institution and its prospects. It really, if you're doing it right, it's not just about the money and raising money for your organization, but it's about the donor and what the donor is excited about and how they engage with you. You've heard me say what are a donor's top 3 philanthropic priorities. Hopefully, they're indicating that to you year after year with their donations. Hopefully, their upgrades and donations, and more importantly, their engagement in the organization. Regardless of whether you're looking at a capital campaign or not, upgrading donors into a major gift category is always fantastic. Next slide. So really, an annual fund also is the basis of the solicitation process. It puts all of the things in play that we've talked about. So from identification and qualification to cultivation to actually making the ask to thanking people for the ask and then re-putting them into that pipeline again. It also serves as an initial invitation to support the organization. It should encourage the donor to learn more about the organization and hopefully become even more supportive. And it can involve gifts through the major gifts level. So I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a moment, but annual fund gifts can be the beginning of the solicitation of major gifts. So for example, let's say your organization defines a major gift of $10,000. Well, an annual fund donor that has been giving you $1,000, maybe they upgrade to $2,500, and then you say, gosh, would you be willing to commit that $2,500 over the next 5 years for a $10,000 gift for this particular project? You start building that into your annual fund process. Next slide. So we invite you to think, get big. So the question for you is, and I always wish on these calls that I could get feedback, but are many small gifts easier to raise than a few large gifts? And Michael, I want you to remember this question. Are smaller gifts easier to raise than a few large gifts? So for example, is it easier to raise one gift of $100,000, 10 gifts of $10,000, or one gift of $1,000, or 1,000 gifts of $100? Well, the answer is it's not all easy to raise, but it does take the same time and effort for each of these levels. So $1,100 gifts is generally going to take about the same time frame as one $100,000 gift if you space it out over time. None of them are easy, but if you have a plan in place, it becomes a lot easier to raise those larger gifts over time. Next slide. So let's talk about the arithmetic of fundraising. You really need a gift range chart to design what we would call a winnable campaign. And when we use the word campaign in this, we're talking about an annual fund campaign. So you need a gift range chart, just like you would for a major gift campaign, but for an annual fund campaign. And you want it to be winnable. You need to look at the quality and quantity of gifts required at each level to accomplish your goal. You also need to know, does your donor base have the number of prospects needed? And the best way to figure that out is to look at who's been giving to you previously, to do an analysis of who's been giving to you over, for example, the last 3 years. If you don't have an annual fund and you're starting from scratch, you're a new organization and you're starting from scratch and you never solicited donors before, you would look at perhaps the annual fund thank yous and donor recognition of like organizations around you, and hopefully attract a base of support or build it out of your events that you're doing. Now, when you make your gift range chart, you also need to assess, is it realistic to expect that these prospects can be identified? Do we even know who they are? If not, do you need to rethink the goal to make it realistic? Is it just somebody else's money? If these donors haven't given to you, it might be that they're interested in another organization. So how would you build that into your file? And I'll explain that here in a second. Next slide. So again, we go back to the pyramid of fundraising. So first time annual giving, you'll see there's new words on here with the blue. How do you find your new annual gifts? Well, perhaps you do a direct mail solicitation. Well, you say, I don't know even who to mail to. Well, who are donors that give to like organizations? So for example, if I'm at the Boy Scouts, I would maybe go to a direct mail house or buy a direct mail list that supports youth programs, that are donors that have supported other youth programs. If I'm a Catholic organization, so for example, a Catholic school, I might buy a Catholic donors list and do a mailing to each of those donors. And you would add people into your database based on their giving. You could also do an online telethon. So are you attracting donors through Facebook or Twitter or some of the online communications, crowdfunding? Of course, through special events, some through earned media where people are giving to you because you broadcast it in some way, shape, or form, or door to door. And it's real unusual that you would do door to door solicitation, but there are certain organizations that actually do that. I would even suggest that the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts do door to door. And if we were in a room and I asked you to raise your hand, how many people have bought popcorn from the Boy Scouts or cookies from the Girl Scouts, most of you would raise your hand. And my question would be, are you capturing the name, address, and phone number of everybody that you've sold Boy Scout cookies, Boy Scout popcorn and Girl Scout cookies to? And are you adding those into your database as potential solicitations for to invite them to participate? Now, repeat annual giving is really more informational. You identify through your first time, and then after that, you have maybe a more personal contact. Maybe your volunteers segment the list and say, I, as a volunteer or a board member, am going to call these 10 people and ask them for a gift. Perhaps it's a personalized letter or a phone call. And then, of course, you move up the pyramid as you go. So annual giving is really all about information for donor acquisition and donor upgrade. Next slide. So we talked about an annual fundraising chart. Don't get nervous about the $500,000 goal. Some of you are going to be closer to this. A big organization that's raising $1 million, $1.5 million dollars a year up to about $5 million a year. This might be a gift range chart of a plan that you would build. So for example, gift ranges, you might have two at $25,000. And yes, believe it or not, there are people that will give $25,000 a year from an annual fund perspective. You might have 4 gifts of $10,000. You might have 18 to 2,500 and down the list. But that base for support at the bottom, that 100 gifts of $1,000. And if you're reading from the left to the right, it's the gift range is the number. You need 100 gifts excuse me, $100. You need number of gifts, 1,000. Total giving over time. Well, a 3-to-1 ratio means you need 3 people who could give you a gift to acquire 1 gift. So just to get 1,000 gifts of $100, you would need 4,512 potential prospects. Now, you see those numbers decrease as you go up the chart. So the answer to the question that I asked earlier is all of it is difficult. So you might think, gosh, it's easier to get people to give $100. Well, perhaps you just need a whole lot more of them. And you probably have a whole lot fewer prospects that could give you all the way up the chart to $25,000. But this is what you need to win on paper. So what you would do is take a spreadsheet of your actual donors and see how many people are giving to you in each of these ranges. And you can build out your plan. Now, this is a $500,000 goal. Now, let me be clear, this is for a $500,000 annual fund campaign. So you would raise these annually. Now, Sarah, I'm going to ask you to move to the next chart. The next one is for a $60,000 goal. So a smaller organization or an organization really just starting might really need to start where they have donors in different categories. So you might not have those big major donors because you haven't had a lot of time to do that. You're just building. So less than $100, you might need 400. I'm starting at the bottom with, prospects of 1,300 all the way up the pyramid to a major gift might be $3,000. And I've worked in several organizations where anything over $1,000 was considered a very big gift for an annual fund. So 2 gifts at $3,000 across the board. My point is, and what I really want you to do is when you get these slides is look at this and build out your own spreadsheet and win it on paper. And not only with the number of gifts that you need, but literally plug in potential donors. So if you need 2 gifts at $3,000 on your spreadsheet, put 2 lines and tell me who those potential prospects are, who those 10 potential prospects are. For $1,500, who would those 30 potential cumulative prospects be, and down the list. When we say you need to win it on paper, this is what we're talking about. Now, you remember this looks very similar to the major gift pyramid that we use in capital campaign fundraising. So the core tenets of fundraising do not change based on the size of the gifts necessarily. They change based on the size of the organization. You set your own thresholds, but you build it out like this. Now, the lines in the middle of each of these are what we would call annual fund, maybe mid-level gifts, and then the major gifts to your organization. But annually, it is possible to attract gifts of these levels. Okay, next slide. So gift chart realities, large gifts make a critical difference without question. So you're always wanting to engage donors over a period of time in your annual fund and ask them for larger gifts over time. Donors who are capable of making extraordinary gifts exist in your database. Generally, it's really, do they want to make an extraordinary gift to you? Well, the only way to know that is if you're engaging them. Extraordinary gifts are not made because the organization never asked. Very, very, very rarely, and I call them bluebirds. A bluebird will just fly in from the sky. Will a major gift come in based on no relationship, and that's extraordinarily unusual. People have asked me before, is $1,000 one-time gift, so a one-time gift of $1,000, more valuable than 10 gifts of $100? Well, the question is, I don't know. How have you engaged that person? Why is somebody giving you $1,000? Have you talked to them? Have you asked them again? Have you asked them to commit 3 years over time? I would suggest if somebody is raising their hand to you and saying $100, $100, $100 over 10 years, and they're not upgrading, that you have an engagement challenge, that you haven't asked them to upgrade their gift. They're certainly committed to you. Finding out why they're committed to you and engaging them in a larger conversation is probably a fantastic place to start. So when we're looking at annual funds and upgrades, we're looking at not just the amount of the donations, we're looking at the number of donations that somebody has made over time. Next slide, Sarah. So questions to consider. Can your donor base support the ratios? And when I say the ratios that were presented in the chart above. So we used a 3-to-1 ratio. You need 3 prospects to have 1 potential donor in that category. Some new funds, if you're brand new at this, you might need a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1 or even a 6-to-1 ratio. You have to have a larger pool of potential donors in order to get a new donor. And that's really where I would like to compliment Michael. Is he started with a relatively small donor base. Clearly he's engaged people, and his prospect pool probably moved from having a 5-to-1, we don't even know if these people will give to us, to a 3-to-1. Gosh, we've been doing this for 10 years and we've grown our base over time. And the question is, can you identify these prospects? Generally, when we ask people to do a spreadsheet based on their gift chart, we find a lot of white space, especially in the top and the middle. They have not identified donors who they could even possibly upgrade. So if not, what can be done about it? Let's talk about that. Next slide. So one of the core tenets in fundraising that we utilize is Rosso's concentric circles. I stole this from the Fundamentals of Fundraising book published by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And if you think about the inner circle, the target, if you will, the best prospects that you have are your board members, any donors, that major donors in the past particularly, and those that are closest to you. So leadership, management, staff. Then you go outer ring and general donors. Then you go volunteers, people that are perhaps volunteering with your organization. They could be potential annual fund donors to you. Employees and staff. Don't forget to invite your employees and staff. Do not shy away from it. If they're working for your organization, they love you. Ask them to make a gift that is meaningful to them. You don't have to make it required, but certainly ask if they would like to be invited to participate. And how do you recognize them? Clients or constituents to your organization. A lot of you are part of organizations that serve people or animals or that sort of thing. Invite your clients to participate with you. People like to be invited. Don't exclude them. Don't exclude them from the opportunity. So people deserve the opportunity to participate. Do you have a membership? Ask them. And then, of course, former participants, those that have previously given to you, are oftentimes the people who will give to you the longest if you can attract them back. So their lifetime giving is very significant. So somebody that's given to you in the past, if you lost them, they've fallen off your file, go back and ask them. And of course, people with similar interests. And so you heard me give the example of, the Boy Scouts, maybe another program that's youth programs, or Catholic Charities, maybe for a Catholic school. Use some common sense and some strategy building about, where are people's values and interests. Next slide. You're going to see this again, by the way. Annual fund solicitation. You need to analyze your donor base. You need to determine the giving trends. Again, very important. Number of gifts at different gift ranges. Number of gifts by donor segment. What is your board giving you? What are your volunteers giving you? If you have any recognition societies, what are they giving you? And you want to divide them out based on those constituencies, because we're going to have a volunteer structure that helps us with that. And you want the right person with the right ask to ask them. So factors for major gift potential is potential years of giving. And when I'm talking about major gifts, remember, it's within the annual fund pyramid. So consecutive years of giving, frequency of giving, giving through events, annual fund, capital, amounts. Have they upgraded? Did they start at 100, now they're giving you 250, maybe 500, maybe 1,000? Have they been moving up over time? And really the date of most recent gift. I did not put it in here, but there is a phrase used in fundraising called SIBONS and LIBONS. SIBONS with an S means same year, some year, but not this year. So when we talk in fundraising about have they given to you, yes, they've given to us some year, but not this past year, is a SIBON. A LIBON is they gave to us last year, but not this year. So when we talk about segmenting the list, don't just look 1 year back, go look 3 or 5 years back of when people have given to you. And anybody that has fallen off the list, they're a huge potential to invite back to participate with you. They liked you once, invite them to come home. Next slide. So how do you approach the different prospect segments? Let's talk about that here for just a moment. Let's go to the next slide. Why include volunteers in fundraising? Well, volunteers are how you're going to divide up your list. You want to include volunteers because they're dedicated to your mission. They're more credible. Remember, peer-to-peer fundraising is the most effective. They represent the community and different areas of the community. They also have access to different social networks than you do. So I'll use Michael as an example. Michael knows a lot of people, not just through Boy Scouts, but through his membership on the board. He also is a member of Rotary, which is really big network. So how can we expand our network using volunteers in their network? Of course, peer-to-peer cultivation and solicitation is just the #1 way. And Michael said it so beautifully earlier, where he said we are volunteer driven, but staff supported. And this is really what we're talking about. And you want to include them because of the scope, depth, knowledge, and connections that they have. So they can give you information and assistance with folks that you might not even know or know exist. Next slide. So volunteers remain engaged with you when they feel valued and when they feel recognized for their contributions and when they know what is expected of them. The worst thing you can do to a volunteer is send them out without the tools to do their job. So make sure that not only are you thanking them and recognizing them for the participation, but are you building a plan for them to be successful? Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like on the next slide. So again, Rosso's concentric circles. Where am I going to get volunteers? Well, ask your other board members, ask major donors, look at your employees for perhaps an employee giving component to your campaign. Look at former clients and participants and people with similar interests. Most things that we do in fundraising come back to this circle. Otherwise, they're falling outside of your circle. So draw those webs of connection. Next slide. So an annual fund committee made up of volunteers is a really great way to start your base. It functions as a really strong volunteer professional partnership, and they're true partners. So you are the staff supported piece of that, you would generally have chairs to serve as leaders for constituent groups. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. And that committee would help support the peer-to-peer cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Next slide. So an organizational structure, and I know this is a little hard to read, but when you get the slides, you can blow it up. This is a literal organizational structure for an organization that I used to work in. So this was a big, small organization. When I say big, small, there were 7 staff members dedicated to fundraising. So it wasn't a university 50 person shop, but they had 7. Some of these were part-time, and those are listed along the bottom. But the board of directors is at the top. Then they had a development committee as a member of the board of directors. And then they had annual committee. They generally would select co-chairs for their annual committee. They would invite immediate past chairs to assist. And then they had different constituent groups. We had a group for just individuals. We had a group for major gifts. So who is the person who has given to you a major gift in your annual fund that might be willing to ask others in that group? Family, and when I say family, maybe that is staff, maybe that's faculty, maybe that's, who are the folks inside of your organization that make a difference. This happened to be a medical facility, so the medical staff was part of it, and the employees, there were individualized campaigns within that. Corporate, maybe somebody takes only the corporate donors. Maybe somebody takes only the industry donors. So for example, the chemical associations. And if you're in the middle of a campaign, you need to recognize that there might be some other gifts on the table, and you just need to be real cognizant of that. Now you can shrink this down. This can be run by one staff member. You don't have to have all these staff members. What you do need to do is have the right people in the right seats of the bus. So any way that you take this down, individuals, you can have it broken by a segment for sure. Okay, next slide. So let's say we're trying to raise $500,000. What does that look like? Well, volunteers, the first question that they're going to ask you is, what is my goal? Well, you go back to the gift chart that you provided and you said, okay, based on who we know is on the board, we think the board could give a total of $25,000. We would like $70,000 from corporate gifts. We'd like $85,000 from our employee giving campaign, and on down. And that's really going to be based on who is on that pyramid, on that chart that you made before. But this gives volunteers something to strive for, to know if they met their goal. Inside of their campaign goals, there can be goals. Next slide. So one of the things that I feel very passionately about is volunteer orientation. Tell them what you want them to do, invite them to come to a meeting, give them the materials to do their job. Provide them with useful information. Believe it or not, for an annual fund campaign, this is the table of contents for that organizational structure. We would give them the actual board of directors list, the development committee's list, because people would we would put volunteers out on the street and they would say, now who's in charge? Who's in the leadership? Do you know so-and-so? So we wanted to make sure that they had that in a little binder. We also gave them their list of who they were going to call and the case for support at their fingertips. We also made sure that they had any of the campaign materials, not just the case for support, but the pledge form that they had. And we gave them a place for updates in the binder. So every time we'd have a meeting and we provided them with updates to the campaign and where we are with the goals, if they wanted to print it out and put it in their little binder, they could do that. Now, this is pretty significant, but at a minimum, you must give your volunteers your case for support, a pledge form, and some method to report back to you who they met with. So on the next slide, I'd like to show you what that looks like. So sample forms, I know this is hard to see, but when you print it out, you can see it. So this would be a sample pledge form. And my favorite part of this form is the box in the middle. So clearly you want to give your volunteers the opportunity to look at this and fill one out for themselves, because you can't ask if you don't give, and give them the opportunity to ask any questions about this form. But you want to make sure that you have a pledge form that is readable, that people understand, that really matches what your case for support is. That square in the middle is, why would we ask them every year if we can ask them to pledge every year over 3 years? So many people build in, many organizations will build in some type of leadership society where people make pledges over 3 years. And so next year you don't have to ask all over again. You're sending them a pledge reminder. But go through this with your volunteer corps. On the next one, and look, you could even cut and paste and copy this one, put your logo on the top. The next form is what I call a prospect call sheet. If you are going to ask volunteers to assist you in asking for people, you've given them the list, you've hopefully given them some indication of what you're asking for. You're asking for $1,000, you're asking for $100. What did they give last year? And a potential ask for this year. So maybe you're upgrading them from 100 to 125. You've got a list of that, but how do you know that they did what they said they were going to do? Well, I like a prospect call sheet. You can even fill this out for them with the prospect's name, but check their address for us. Did you have a great conversation? Here's your ask amount. Were you able to get in touch with them? Any general notes about it? So for example, general note would be, gosh, I asked this person and they moved out of state. Well, that's really valuable information for us. Or I asked this person and they asked us if the pledge, they said they'd make a pledge, but they want to make sure that that pledge starts in December of the year, not necessarily in August. This is a way for you to collect that information. It's also a way for you to keep track and help your volunteers help themselves. I tease frequently that the due date is the date due. So I actually serve on the board of the Boy Scouts here, had a call yesterday, and they wanted an update on exactly this in my annual fund fundraising. So yesterday morning, I spent about 2 hours calling all of my prospects and filling out my little form so that I would be ready for the call. I didn't want to be embarrassed, but I knew who I was supposed to ask. I knew what I was supposed to ask. I had a method of reporting back to them, and I knew the date that I would have to have a check-in. So I was managed by somebody just like Michael, giving information back. And I felt relatively good about my progress because I knew all of those things in advance. I had the tools to do my job. Next slide. So let's talk a moment about the ladder of effectiveness really in fundraising and what that looks like, particularly in an annual fund. The lowest return is generally media advertising. We put out something in the media that is on social media saying, hey, give to us. It's just a one-way communication, and if we're lucky, somebody gives to us. Then it goes to a impersonal phone call or telemarketing, and that's literally a telemarketing call saying, we're calling from the XYZ organization, would you possibly give? Product sales, you heard me talking about, selling popcorn. Sometimes people do over and above on things like that. Door-to-door solicitation, for safety reasons, this is not something that I would suggest. However, there are still organizations that do door-to-door. Impersonal letter, direct mail, going up the ladder, if you will. And really, when we get to the middle, the personal phone call. The personal phone call is where we really start the engagement process with volunteers, and the effectiveness goes up exponentially. You'll remember last week when we had the rings of circles, when you involve the volunteer, the gifts get larger. Well, the same thing is true in annual fund. A personal phone call from a peer, you'll answer the call. I always say, whose phone call would you take immediately if you saw it ringing, and whose ask would you be unable to refuse? A personal letter, a thank you note, a phone call followed with a letter, huge personal letter with follow-up phone call, and then of course person to person. Hi, this is Beverly. Can I meet you for coffee? I'd like to talk to you about the Boy Scouts. I'm on the annual fund committee this year, and I'd like to meet to talk to you about what they're raising money for, and give you the opportunity to support it. That kind of ask. So this is the ladder, up the ladder, most effective. Next. So again, your case for support, we've hammered this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but on an annual basis for your operating fund, what are you raising money for specifically? It's a very powerful marketing tool. When you give it to volunteers and or you as a staff member give it to somebody, what specifically are you raising money for? What is that brochure look like? Is that also on your website? It communicates all the reasons for giving. In many cases, it communicates how you can give, and it really allows you to match a donor's values and interests with the organization's mission and vision. Next slide. So remember, it articulates a bold vision, it invites participation, it communicates all the reasons for giving. You want to make sure that what you're raising more money for in your case for support aligns with the strategic plan of the organization, and again, the values and interests. Anything that you can make compelling storytelling is really important. And anytime you can talk about the impact of last year and the success that you had in your case for support for this year is always helpful. This can be one page, by the way, or something very extensive. So usually an emotional lead-in, it's got your mission and vision. It's got a little history of the organization, short explanation of all the programs that you're raising money for. That doesn't mean that you're asking for dedicated support, but if you are to give to XYZ organization, you would be supporting these programs and initiatives. The outcomes and proof of impact again, and ways of giving. Okay, next. So here's some homework for you to do. I want you to go look at your file, and I want you to look at it from this perspective. How do we turn any event attendees, any participants, anybody that walks through your doors, anybody that likes you on Facebook, how do you turn those attendees into annual fund donors? Are you capturing their name, address, phone number, email, ways to contact? Other than special events, how can we acquire new donors? So outside of general events, what are other ways that you can acquire new donors? Are you asking your volunteers? Are you asking your board members to bring people to the table? Then I want you to look at your file and say, how do we identify not just prospects, but prospects for upgrade? What do we need to do donor by donor in order to cultivate and solicit them? And from a stewardship perspective, remember, in terms of fundraising, stewardship is how are we going to thank them over and over and over again? And why is stewardship important? Stewardship helps you build people up the donor pyramid, but it also helps you communicate the impact that their money is having. And what role can the board play in this? Remember when I held up my favorite little cards last week, as a board member, are you giving board members the opportunity to call and thank people that have made gifts that perhaps they had some involvement in? So this is homework for you. Really, this will be extraordinarily helpful for you as you look at your file. You're not just looking at blanket fundraising here. You're building a plan through acquisition, donor renewal, upgrade, and stewardship. Next slide. So remember the donor continuum. At every place, annual fund fundraising is about identifying and qualifying your prospects. How do you identify them? How do you qualify them? Are you building trust with them? Are you stewarding their money appropriately? Have you located their values and interests? You know what resonates with them in your particular organization. So, for example, I am a Boy Scout mom. I bet Michael could tell you why I would possibly give to the organization or what I might be interested in. I bet he listens to something I said earlier. Can you match their philanthropic passions and then gain the gift? And do you make that gratifying? And remember, all times at the bottom, it's not about the money. It's about what's meaningful for the donor. Next slide. So the donor engagement process, or what we call moves management, is a system of policies, procedures, and practices that direct the actions of nonprofits to bring donors further along, forge those relationships, and then build them into major gifts. It's literally looking at each prospect saying, how are we going to upgrade them? How are we going to thank them? And how are we going to move them from a place of identification to a place of cultivation, to a place of asking, to a place of thanking back into the system. Otherwise, we stay in professional cultivating mode. We're all about the coffee all the time, but we never actually make the ask. Next slide. So moves management. What donor engagement is not. It's not necessarily for every donor in the database, but look at your prospects based on recency of gifts, frequency of gifts, and the ability to move them up. You don't want to take a cookie cutter approach. That's one of the reasons why you engage volunteers, and you want to make sure it looks different for each prospect. You want this to feel natural to the donor. You don't necessarily want them to say, you don't want to say, I'm cultivating you for ... You want to make sure that it feels relationship oriented. And you want to make sure that it's documented and measurable. How are you tracking those behaviors? You also don't want it to feel a hit and run. So for example, there's an organization that calls me every year at the same time, and I never hear from them except for money. I want to hear about all the other great things that they're doing, don't just call me once a year for my check. Invite me to participate with you. That might be even online, but tell me about my gift. Thank me for that gift. Tell me what's going on with the organization. Tell me how you're reacting to COVID. Next slide. So what are moves, cultivation opportunities, changes in the donor relationship, all of those things? I'm going to let these slides go. Moves management. Sarah, if you'll flip through these, I want you to have them because they're important. But this slide right here is really important. Examples of moves that you can build into your annual fund. Check this out. You could bring them on a facility tour. You could have lunch. You could invite them to a groundbreaking. You could send them a donor packet. You can send them a birthday card. These are all samples of moves that move people through the process. So it's not just about the annual fund, but what is the engagement throughout the year to get them higher up your pyramid. So cultivation and moves management are important, and I invite you to take a look at these. They're important to you. But right now, I really want to flip and stop the discussion and invite Michael to come back and let's have a conversation with Frank McNamara, your board. And again, friends, I want to apologize that we had this little hiccup. We can stop straight at 6, but if you have questions that need to go longer, I'm willing to stay. Michael, what did you hear in all of this? Does this sound like what you do? Any surprises?
No, not any big surprises. A lot of it is just what the plan and the structure has been, and there's always variations. But you do have to just realize that if this is your goal, this is what you need to plug away at, and how do you expand your base.
Well, I would like to introduce Frank McNamara, who, as Sarah mentioned before he hopped on the phone with us. Frank, I see that you're there.
I'm here.
Frank is a member of the board. He also used to be a former staff member with the Boy Scouts. So tell us a little bit about your role with the Boy Scouts and what they engage you to do in the annual fund.
I would say in an annual fund, what Mike does, and I put it back on Mike because he's kind of he's at the steering wheel. He keeps us going. He tells us what direction to go and so on and so forth. Generally my role is going to be the ask. I have 5 people or 5 cards or whatever I pick up, and I'll reach out to these guys. And of course, I got to give myself. And Mike wouldn't let me off the hook if I didn't give myself. And that makes the ask so much easier as well. I mean, whenever I'm asking someone to give, if I'm a donor myself, this is why I give. This is why it's important to me. And and make the sale based on my experiences that I've had, and which have all but for the most part been very, very positive. And I identify with the organization with what their drive is and what their goals are, or something that I think is very important to our community. And that's why I give. That's why I volunteer.
That's fantastic. So you said a word and I understood what you meant because I know how the Boy Scouts work, but I don't know that everybody did. You said the words, I picked up a few cards. Now talk to us about what that is. And I believe what you're referring to is the preparation that Michael does to get you ready for an ask. But talk to us about that. What's on that? What does that look like?
Oh yeah, the card is like when you had a little information, it's kind of saying someone's name, their telephone number, what they gave last year, and in some cases it'll have ask for. If say they gave 500 and we want to ask them for 750. If you don't ask them for 750, they're going to give the most they're going to give is 500. So the whole idea is to move them up. And if they say no, I can't do 750, but I can do 600. Okay, that's
okay.
Last year, I'm happy with that. Like I said, it'll have on the card. It's like a pledge form, and has their name, their contact number, what they've given in the past year or several years in some cases, and
awesome.
Then that lets us know what they've done, if they've fallen off the boat. Okay, hey, I know you used to give. We want to try to get you back on board. And maybe they just weren't asked.
Wait, say that again?
Oh, yeah. If you don't ask, they're not going to give.
Yeah. So y'all remember I talked about SIBONs and LIBONs that some year, but not this year. We find a lot of times SIBONs just haven't been asked. Has that been your experience, Frank?
Absolutely. And I mean, both when I worked, full time for the Boy Scouts and then as a volunteer, is that, it's easy for someone to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're very good donors and very good volunteers, or people who just give because they connect with it. Yeah. And if we're not gonna ask, they're not gonna give. I mean,
that's a big deal.
Big deal.
Okay, Frank, I'm going to totally put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I want you to call me, pretend like you have just called me and asked me for a gift. How does that go? Ring, ring.
Okay.
Hi, Frank. How are you? It's good to hear from you. What's going on?
Beverly, just got home from work. It was a good day and no complaints there. Things in your life okay with all this crazy COVID stuff?
Things are good. Trying to get those boys back in school, but doing fine.
Good deal. Good deal. We're all looking ready for school. I think my daughter in June said she was ready to go back to school. And I said, well, I'm ready for you to go back to school too.
I know. I think we're all ready. So what can I do for you today, Frank?
Hey, I'm reaching out because I'm involved with the Boy Scouts here.
Oh, yeah.
And
didn't you used to work for them?
I did. I grew up in the program as a kid. I worked for them out of school, and I've stayed active as a volunteer.
That's so great.
Beverly, what we're looking for is we're looking for people to give. And I know you have a connection to the organization, and
I
you know what it
do.
does to our youth, and you know what it means for them tomorrow, and would like to ask you to make a gift of $1,000 to help our
Oh,
council.
wow. Okay. Well, I know I've given before. Do you happen to know what I gave before?
Yeah, year before last, you gave $800.
Okay. So you need me to give a little more? Well, I got
Yeah,
all
you
these
missed
boys
last
in
year, so we're going to step
school.
up.
You're right. I did. Okay. Well, I will commit to $1,000. But let me ask you, Frank, am I able to pay that over time, or do I need to write one
Heck
check?
yeah,
How does that
no,
work?
whatever's easiest for you.
Okay.
We'll send you a statement for, quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever works.
Awesome. Okay. So somebody will follow up with me with some information. Tell them I'm
Yeah,
a
I got your
yes.
address here, 125 Main Street, and your
That's it.
email. Okay, we're good.
Oh, you're so great. Okay, Frank.
Thank
I
goodness this
love
is
the Boy
recorded.
Scouts. I love the Boy Scouts. But Frank, I know you've got a Girl Scout and I'm on that board, so I'm going to be calling you back
There you go.
in a month or two.
Amen.
Okay, how realistic was that call?
It's pretty typical. You do a little small talk, find out what's going on, how things are going. Especially with what's been going on in today's world, economically and health wise, and talk a little bit and then get to the point. Just like they want to know what's going on. Hey, I'm glad you called, but what's up?
What's up? What's up? Yeah, they're not
hadn't
surprised.
talked to you in about 6 months. What's going on now?
Yeah.
And so tell them why you're calling, why it's important to you, and make the pitch.
Okay.
And give them an amount. Give them an amount. If they say no, I can't give 1,000, but I can get 800 again. Okay, fine.
Well, I love that you put a number on the table. It gives me a place to react to. Michael, anything that we missed in our conversation?
I recorded it all. No, we're good.
I'm on the hook. Frank, I have to tell you, you are a rock star asker.
Oh,
Clearly, you have been around the block before. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been provided with a script, and how do you feel about that?
Yes, I've been provided with a script. And usually what I'll do, if it's something I'm completely unfamiliar with, I'll follow it. If it's an organization like the Boy Scouts that I'm very familiar with, or something at church I'm very familiar with, or the kids' school, I'll pull in the script and make it my own.
Yeah. Okay, friends, I'm a big fan of a script, and that doesn't have to be big, but it says, hello, this is Beverly, right? So Michael, when you talk about the volunteer management, how do you get to a place that you're even asking Frank to do this? How do you decide who's going to call who? What does that look like?
So in our orientation meeting, like Frank mentioned, the cards, we run reports and print out lists just of names, not background information or anything like that, because you don't know, sometimes there's someone in there that's just ambitious and wants to develop their own prospecting list for their career, which is fine. We want to encourage that to help them as well.
So donor protection of information is an important thing.
Absolutely. So, we go through the list and it's about 10 to 15 minute orientation and discussion. And then the rest of the meeting is them going through their list and their pledge, and we're done. So some people are done in 20 minutes. Some people are done in 45 minutes or an hour, depending on how many times, how long they've been doing this. But, we start at every meeting we have, there's an ask, and, for that pledge and for that support. And one of the things I met with my counterpart for Atlanta before I moved here, and he put me on the spot. He asked me what my gift was going to be when I got here, and I said, well, I'm thinking I need to lead the way. I'll probably give $1,500. And he's like, well, is that going to hurt? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's decent. And he said, no, it needs to hurt. And he said, and here's the reason why. and here's the charge. And this is, again, I didn't know what I was walking into. I was told what I was walking into, but that wasn't necessarily the case at all. He said, as a fellow board member and being the CEO and secretary and SCAT executive, you need to be able to go to your board and ask them and challenge them to join you. As a fellow board member, I'm given, and I ended up doing $2,500.
Wow.
I'm given $2,500.
Yeah.
Because that did hurt and that created that drive. But it said, can you please join me at that level?
Right. And no offense, but anybody that is working in nonprofits, they know, your board knows that you're not making a huge amount of money. I mean,
Right.
you're making good money, but you're not making a huge amount of money, but they do expect you to be able to give at a leadership level on an annual fund. If you are the CEO of an organization, they expect you to make a leadership gift. Generally, you set that as a group, right? Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. So I don't have the give or get policy, but again, so that's my challenge and my charge. Look, this is what I'm given. I'm a fellow board member with you. Please join me. And then, and a lot of, so that's the group appeal, as well as, Willie Mount is our board president. So now she's the one making that request. Join me at this. And if someone doesn't feel comfortable giving that day, that's fine. They can write on the note, please meet with me or whatever. And so then the follow-up conversation is, okay, if you can't join me at what I'm giving, can you give half of what I'm giving?
Right.
And that increased our giving immediately, because before a lot of our board members were giving $300-400. Well, now I'm throwing out the gauntlet.
There I am. I'm giving this. I think that is an important statement that needs to be reiterated. And Frank said it, and you have said it. You cannot ask if you have not given. So regardless of what I call equal sacrifices to you, and
Absolutely,
you need to, and you need to give something and be able to say, I have given. Would you join me to your volunteers?
right. And I don't care what the annual gift is, and that's why I don't have the get or get policy. Yeah. Even with my staff or anybody, I treat the person that the 8-year-old kid that gives me $3.37 and change the same as I do my $10,000 donor or $25,000 or my $100 donor. Nobody gets more of my time than the other.
So here's a tricky thing. When you're inviting Frank and his team of volunteers to be on the board, how do you make sure that they've given before they ask? I want to hear from Michael, and then I want to hear from Frank.
Again, we ask, and we have pledge forms at every meeting. So we do it right then and there when we do the orientation. If they haven't given already. Now, our campaign starts in November for the following year. We send out the annual appeal letter to say, look, for tax purposes, if this has been a great year for you, or you like a tax gift, or you just want to help us kick it off. That way we're going into the year. The first year was $30,000, then $60,000, and $70,000 that we're starting January 1 with, which is great, instead of March 1st waiting for 100 or 200.
Right. That makes sense.
So
they see it at all times. How about you, Frank? Do you, when you're invited to be a volunteer, do you have an expectation of what that duty is?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. I have an expectation. And sometimes they surprise me. They'll have a number that, I don't know, kind of like you did with you. Shoot for the, shoot higher. But I know I think it's at our annual business meeting in November. Mike, when we had that, Mike would or Willie would they would say, okay, hey, at this time we're going to make our invite everyone on the board to make their gift for their pledge for 2021. Here's your form. And on it, it's written down what you did last year, and they always put a number down. Please consider. Boom. And which is good. And
it is good.
Everybody signs up there, and they pick them up. And then whenever we have any other meeting on down the road, hey, we've already, this is what I've done.
We're committed.
And,
I have a couple of questions from the group too.
So I see a few of these. One, I'm going to ask Frank, what do you think is the best day and time to make appeal calls?
I like the morning. People were fresher. And I mean, not real early, mid-morning,
Yeah, like 10-ish,
9:30 to
9:30,
11, somewhere in that
Yeah.
range. And that's just me. I mean, I get my best work done. I get there early, and so I get my best work done then. But I like, if I'm gonna make calls to people on the annual thing, I do it in the morning.
Yeah. So
And,
business days,
yes,
generally 9
generally
to
business
11.
days. I don't
That
want to
would,
catch them at home. I don't want to bother them after they got off work. I
yeah,
don't want them to, sitting there, having a cocktail or whatever, and all of a sudden, Frank calls and asking for $1,000. No, I don't want to bother them
right.
then.
People generally feel, that would have been my answer. People generally feel better in the morning. By the middle of the afternoon, they are so stressed out about all the things they didn't get because
Right.
they've gotten those calls earlier in the day, and they're worried about where they're going and what they have to do. So I would say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, between 8:30 and 11. If you call it
Yeah.
lunch, you're going to get voicemail.
Yeah.
Michael, would you agree with that?
I mean, it really depends on the person. At a
Yeah.
broad stroke, yes, but it depends on the person making the ask also. I had a volunteer in Daytona. He didn't care, and he was a very brash individual, very colorful. And so I would go and I'd schedule regular meetings with him to keep him on task because he was all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'd bring a list of 3 to 5 names each time I met with them. And at the end
Okay.
of the deal, he had worked like 80 calls, where before he might have worked like 10 or 12. But he was absolutely the person to make the call. And we called in the morning, we called in the afternoon. He had supported so many people that it didn't really matter when Charlie called.
Gotcha. It
so-
really
and
depends.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you, in Louisiana, do not call on Saturday game day, whatever that team is
No.
for you, and do not call during a Saints game. I always call Sunday afternoons because that's the only time I have free, and I always inevitably make somebody mad. So don't call during Louisiana football. So here's a great question. I'm going to pose it to both of you. When someone is meeting you for coffee or dinner to discuss a potential donation, what is the etiquette for who pays?
I pay.
You pay.
Yeah.
If
I'll
you're
pay.
inviting, if you're
If I
doing
invite 'em,
inviting,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But, Beverly, let's meet for lunch. I want to talk to you about something. I'm
Yeah.
paying for it.
Yeah. So I teach etiquette, and I'm more than happy to share with y'all my professional etiquette stuff. And we talk about this a little bit. Generally, if you're doing the inviting, even if you work for the nonprofit, you need to be prepared to pay for it. Now, as a nonprofit executive, and I'm watching Michael nod his head, very frequently your donors will say, absolutely not, I am paying.
Right.
You should offer, but I can tell you, as a working professional, not for a nonprofit, if somebody asks me, I'm going to take the check because that's a donation for me. I mean, I consider in my head that, gosh, I'm going to take care of lunch. But if you're asking, you need to be prepared. So don't go somewhere fancy for dinner if it's not a major gift.
And you let them order first. If you're doing the inviting, you let them order first, so you know what perimeters to stay in. So if they are picking up the tab for it, you're not.
Yeah.
You don't want them to order a chicken sandwich and you're ordering a steak just cause. And
Yeah.
but always be prepared to pay.
Good point.
Yeah. And I would offer that if you're going on a joint call, so Michael and Frank are going on a joint call to ask Beverly for a major gift, that y'all need to work that out before you go.
Right.
Who's going to ask, who's going to do what? Well, this is unique times right now, right? We've got our COVID situation. We've got a strange economic downturn happening. Unique times call for unique solutions. How are y'all reacting to COVID? And what are your thoughts on annual fund fundraising in these times? How are y'all reacting?
So we were fortunate. My time here, Scout is thrifty, one of the 12-point Star Scout law. And we were blessed with some surpluses to kind of build up a reserve because everything had been depleted, as I said earlier. Again, I think for the most part, generally speaking, our mindset around the country was that this is going to be a short-term thing and, we'll get back to business. So we have been blessed, but at this point now, we know that we need to go ahead and act. So there are some of my counterparts in different areas that are doing virtual events, still using the leadership structure, making the calls like you guys are doing in Baton Rouge. You're still making the calls and working the plan. Like I said before, it doesn't matter what the plan is, but it's a commitment to the plan. And with us, we've been very blessed that we have more than ramped up our program offerings. And we're not just serving our 2,000 plus families here, but also we've had participants from all over the country and even over the world. We've had several scouts from Japan and Europe participate in some of our program offerings that we've done. So we're now putting that data together to go ahead and send out another solicitation of support. It's also our 100th anniversary this year. So, we're trying to now capitalize on that and do another introductory level campaign for new prospects, $100 for the 100th anniversary and just something small like that. So we will be working the phones and following up on our gifts as well, because we had already had 2 of our kickoff events, our orientations, and then literally like the following day, COVID,
Wow.
the stay-at-home orders came.
Wow.
So, but we were at $70,000 of our campaign from starting in November and then doing the front end stuff. So
recurring gifts must be really important to you.
it is on all of our pledge forms. We put that on the annual Givers Club. And again, it's just, you're not having it. These are people that are near and dear to you, close to you, and you don't have to worry about that. You now focus, because typically speaking, I wrote this down earlier, our renewal rate is between 80 and 85%.
What? That's amazing. That's really significant.
It is.
So what do you think is the reason?
I think it's just the affinity and the hard work and the connection to the program and the communication and
good volunteers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you said it before, but have a plan, ask your volunteers, that's the right volunteers, orient your volunteers, provide them with the tools to do their job, and follow up. What
Absolutely.
Stay
on their back.
What did you say, Frank?
I said, stay on them. I mean, if you don't, they're going to drop the ball. You gotta stay on them. I mean, they get other things in their mind. They get soccer with the kid or whatever. And, I forgot about that. And,
that is something else I wanted to say, Beverly, too. I was blessed in my first year with the Scouts. I had a neighbor who was like a brother to me. And he said, Mike, look, I committed to helping you. And I was a naive, 21-year-old kid. What do I know? I was like, man, Donnie agreed to do this. What's the deal? And he said, Mike, I want to help. I committed to helping you. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, what can I do to help Scouts today? I wake up in the morning and I think, I need to sell some cards today.
That's right.
He said, so stay in touch. You're not harassing me, even if you are. I committed to help.
That's right.
So I was so grateful I learned that lesson early on.
That's exactly right.
I never feel bugged. I feel like I haven't done my job a lot. How about you, Frank?
Right. Amen. Yes.
Yeah.
And,
I want somebody.
Mike calls and I see that and I go, oh, I haven't done that yet. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
I know what he's calling for, and that's fine. That's good.
Yeah. I think another thing with annual funds that people don't realize is how long ago it was since their most recent gift.
Yes.
Somebody called me recently and they said, well, and I said, oh, what I give last year? And they said, you haven't given since 2017. And I couldn't believe it. I literally thought I gave them money last year.
Yeah.
So one thing I did is I modified our pledge cards when I got here. I don't say on there, your gift in 2015 was. I say your past gift was.
Oh, nice.
And I take the maximum gift that they've given and I put that in there. And then we put in, 4 other amounts for them to choose from and then another.
I like that. How do you feel about monthly recurring gifts? Do you do any of those?
So when we receive a pledge form, whether it's from a volunteer or from the individual themselves, we send out a confirmation letter. Thank you for your pledge of XYZ, or thank you for your gift that they sent in a check.
Yeah.
In that, we ask how they would like to be reminded.
Yeah.
And so how Boy Scouts America is set up is that we can spend pledges. Of course, you have to be careful. You have to know what your shrinkage rate is going to be and so forth. But that's how we're set up.
Okay.
So we ask for that reminder. What I found here locally is most people pay in full.
Yeah.
They just want to be done with it. They do it, whatever. But, in other places, there's been monthly, there's been quarterly. So
Yeah.
however they give, we put that on them. How would you like to be billed it once, reminded it once, or so
Yeah.
forth?
I actually split my gifts over 12 months just because I like it that way for budgeting. And I forget about it. So
Yeah.
they're calling me each year for an upgrade, and over time I'm like, oh wow, I'm giving you how much money,
Right.
which is helpful though. I mean, it kind of disappears. Frank, I want to ask you before we wrap up, we have about 3 minutes left. How do you like to participate in the stewardship or the thanking process?
Usually what I'll do is thank the people I ask. If somebody, somebody makes a pledge with me, whether it be on the phone or in person or at lunch or whatever, and they say, yeah, I'm good for that, put me down for it. And we fill out the form right there. I got it. We're going to fill it out. And they sign it, and I bring it in. We finish and go on our way. And then I'll call them back, and I'll say, hey, I really appreciate that. And the Boy Scouts appreciate that because, it's people like you that keeps, our wheels turning and keeps our fire starting. And
That's a great.
so, yeah, absolutely. And
That's so
it's
helpful.
important. You got to thank them. And, a personal call is huge, afterwards. I thank them then, and then I'll call them, a couple days later. Hey, just wanted to thank you again for meeting with me and pledging.
Thank you for that. One of the things I did not hear you say is email. Do you find phone calls more effective than email?
Yes. Personal. I mean, I think, you had when I was listening and watching your order of things, your most impersonal is your media and all the way up to person. And, email, I think it's probably somewhere a little bit better than media, but it's easy to delete or say, I didn't see it, whatever.
Delete. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
especially when we get as many emails as we do these days. And, so yeah, the personal, either a call or personal face-to-face is the way to go.
That's so great. Well, gentlemen, you two have been just terrific. I want to apologize to everyone for my computer not working and thank Sarah for jumping on. There are a number of slides that we did not get through, but they are mostly self-explanatory. So I do invite you to get the recording, and Sarah's going to send you a PDF of all the slides. And my email, nobody's taking me up on this with the exception of Michael Beer. My email is on the end of each of those slides. And if you have specific questions, especially given our little hiccup today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at any time. Fundraising is really exciting and fun if you follow the plan and you work your plan. An annual fund is really, in my opinion, the most important thing that we do as far as building a broad base and foundation of support. And it is really people like Frank McNamara who make that world go. So thank you, Frank, for taking the time and being so open and honest and let me trick you on the phone and make you ask me for a gift. And Michael, what I know for sure is you can have awesome volunteers, but being the ringleader and giving them all the tools that they need to do their job is equally important. So thank you both for your service to Southwest Louisiana, and just so grateful for what you do. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of the Boy Scouts, and you can put me on your list. I'll send you something.
I got you.
Hey, Frank, you better not answer your phone because everybody on this call heard how good you are at asking. They're going to want you on their board. Thank you all for participating. Sarah, back to you.
Yes, just a great thank you, team from the Boy Scouts, and thank you, Beverly, for another outstanding couple of hours of learning of how we elevate philanthropy in the different missions that we all serve in Southwest Louisiana. And Frank and Mike, definitely great information. Thank you for showing us what it's really like out there in the trenches. It's great to see the slides and hear it from Beverly, and then hear how the real world puts it into action. So I think this
Really
is
does.
fun. So on behalf of the Junior League as well as the Community Foundation, thank you all for participating. And we have one more session next Thursday at 4, where we'll talk about events and online events. And so you or others are welcome to sign up for that. And also please be looking for the survey so that you can let us know some of your major takeaways from today.
That's
Thanks,
great.
everybody.
I'm going to keep this phone line open for another 5 or 10 minutes. If anybody wanted to unmute themselves and ask me a question, Sarah, you can stop recording. But if anybody wanted to ask me any questions, since we didn't have the full amount of time, I'll stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, y'all have a great evening. Thank you so much.